And so he starts out this chapter with talking about this really famous earthquake in 1755 in Lisbon, a Lisbon earthquake. It was measured at 8.5, 9.1 on the magnitude scale, which is huge. It's devastating. Lisbon laid in ruin for nearly 6 years. The devastation extended far beyond the city, affecting some close to 6 million square miles of the Earth's surface. Big, making an unprecedented disaster. All in all, some 30,000 to 40,000 people died with little to no warning. And so that's where he launches off.
So he says the toll of the Great Lisbon earthquake could not be limited, though, just to the lives claims and the material destruction that it wrought. It shook the world in far more devastating ways, right? People began to view things in a different light as a result of this earthquake. For the first time since Christianity had transformed the Western world, God came under broad, serious public assault for the problem of pain, evil, and suffering, he tells us. Lisbon put cracks in the West's long-standing confidence in a wise, powerful, benevolent God. Philosophers, theologians, professors, statesmen, pastors, priests, men of letters were all asking the same questions, right? Which were, did the Creator care about the deaths of innocent people? Could he hear the cries of desperation when disaster hit? Why did he not prevent this disaster in the first place? So it allowed people to begin to question the Christian worldview and their view of God and their view of God's mercy and goodness and grace and that sort of thing. The basic problem of evil. Why does God allow this to happen?
Right. And here's a natural disaster is what we would call it. So there's no terroristic element. You can't point to, here's man's ultimate view of evil embodied in this group of people.
So that would be a moral evil, right?
Sure.
So there's a distinction here between natural evil and moral evil. Right. And this would be a natural evil is what it's usually called, as opposed to when we kill each other, which is a moral evil. Right.
Yeah. But there it's different. And so if you're kind of wanting to get a flavor of this as well, I did for Revive Studios. They had John Gill was a preacher, and there was this big storm, and I think several years later on an anniversary, he has a sermon that talks about that. So he covers just a little bit of kind of the problem of evil, but he ties it in to Jesus' own ministry and the need for faith, the need for trust within the understanding of that. And so I'll include the link at that below. But this kind of has that same one where that storm was localized to Britain here. It had, as we were talking about, ramifications that philosophers and scientists and just people had of where was God in all this, or why did he allow this to happen? So the section, the Enlightenment attack on biblical theism. Here's the clash of worldviews that we're always kind of wanting to highlight. The Lisbon earthquake came at a moment in history as the Enlightenment was coming to prominence. The Enlightenment has marked the most momentous shift in Western civilization since the advent of Christianity in the first century, which I think is fairly certain. Christianity, there's the Bible passage of these men turned the world upside down, and the fall of the Roman Empire is it was such a solidifying movement, a regime. All roads led to Rome is incredibly accurate. The language unified the entire earth. If you didn't speak the language, you could be killed easily because of how much. And then over expansion, it split into two kingdoms, which I'm sure the Jews viewed in some capacity as irony there. And so you had Christianity kind of fill the void that it shouldn't have.
In the 4th century when Constantine kind of, said, hey, we're going to make Rome a Christian country, basically, right? Or
at least stop killing them for a while. That would have been nice.
Yeah, and so then things began to take off. And for the next, 1,000 years, right, or so, more, actually. Christianity was the worldview. It ruled how people's thoughts, especially in the West.
And so you also had, not just secularism kind of a highlight here, but you had kind of the Reformation point as well, and wanting to Advantes, go back to the sources, and you had kind of the idea of, well, you can't just trust the experts anymore. You kind of have to figure out for yourself. And so all these things, I wish I had a good book to recommend to you. Maybe I will in the comment section on the Enlightenment, just how important it is. But picking up, even going through probably Wikipedia or finding a good video on the Enlightenment would help you if you don't know much about this moment in history. But it's definitely a kind of a match strike within history of at least our modern world. So the Enlightenment would change how people thought not only about God, but about man, creation, morality. Science became really prominent here, classifying things, putting things into kingdoms, phylums, and all those things really kind of honed out here. It would radically alter theology, epistemology, science, and ethics. Its conception of God stripped him of virtually all he has revealed of himself in Scripture, instead of equally transcendent and immanent personal God to whom we owe everything. He was regarded merely as an abstract supreme being who dealt with his cosmos and his creatures through impersonal secondary causes. And so, the deism kind of comes here. Every founding fathers claimed, they weren't Christian, they were deists. And I think on one hand, Christians tend to overclaim Christianity, but also deists or people that want to push for a deistic idea.
Overclaim that.
Overclaim that, yeah. So everyone hates that, Thomas Jefferson exacto knifed his Bible away. But then you also have to realize he's trying to take that scripture to people like Native Americans who could understand it easier. And he was trying to... He thought he was helping God in a little bit of trying to get the highfalutin miracles out of the way. So looking at history not just as, did you know? Okay, we need to kind of take a good general overview, and going back to the sources, taking primary sources really helps in that. So that's a little aside preaching.
Yeah. So, with the biblical God relegated to the periphery of the ideas and that sort of thing because of the influence of the Enlightenment, man became the measure of all things in the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment took the idolizing of man to the extreme, right? Human reason, as opposed to divine revelation, right, began to revolt against its place of subservient to divine revelation, and it eventually replaced it altogether. So now reason rules as opposed to what God has to say. Reason was no longer explained and corrected by revelation. Instead, it became hostile to biblical truth, resulting in the rise of the historical critical method that sought to erode the inspiration, authority, and sufficiency of Scripture. So what we moved from then in the pre-Enlightenment time was a situation where, at least in the West, where revelation was our source of knowledge and everything else, right? The divine revelation, so the Scriptures. And then the Enlightenment said, well, wait a minute, our reasoning, we can reason. In fact, Thomas Aquinas tried to put this revelation and reason together when he got a hold of Aristotle, right? And, because he argued that, hey, why is it that secular people can have knowledge? And he said, well, it's because God has given everybody this capacity to reason, right? And so reason then began to take over. And, of course, the Enlightenment time, Kant and others, emphasized that reason was king, as it were. It was superior. It was the main source of knowledge, right?
Yeah, we went from in the beginning God, or had God said, to then I think, therefore I am.
Yeah.
Descartes' famous summation of 3 days in a cabin that upends the world there too. And so you have that shift, and Descartes, unfortunately, the Roman Catholic himself, I don't know if he knew the influence that he would have, but there's his place in history. So as a result of all of this, divine revelation took a blow. All truth claims about religious faith are subject no longer to what God might say, but to human reason. If I can't think it, then what good is having this outside source? It needs to originate from me, or I need to understand it, something along those lines. The dismantling of the Christian theistic foundation for epistemology, that's the theory of knowledge, how we know things, and science meant the same for ethics. Why should we do things? Why ought we do things? Whoa, what are shoulds and oughts there as well? The Enlightenment sought to ground ethics in something other than God. Ethics is in the so-called Age of Reason began to be rooted in the notion of universal rational principles, not in a sovereign and virtuous God. So there you have, Aristotle, the forms, idealism coming through and all that.
Yeah.